Hello everyone. Disappointing, wasn't it, having that game called off yesterday? So, fancy an AskWxm podcast? Oh, why the heck not? I do apologise, I've been intending to do them for a while, and I've just not got round to it, which is no real excuse. Just to give a bit of a sense of context as to how long it is since I last did this, I'm pretty sure the last one I did was on my summer holiday in Carcassonne, in France, where I heard that Ben Foster had left us. So yeah, we're talking about a good year and a half. Anyway, I'm going to crack on. This is a mixture because I have been collecting some old AskWxms, and by the way, I did promise I'd also do one which looks at the phraseology of football, and I am going to do that. Don't worry, I'm still pulling it together. But this one, we're going to look at some old podcasts and also old pod. See, I haven't done it for a while. Forgot what I'm talking about. We're going to look at some old questions from AskWxm and also some new ones. And from those of you who are not familiar with it, the hashtag AskWxm, AskWxm, is on Twitter. It's also on Blue Sky. Started it up to get some interaction with the audience while we were doing the Wrexham game commentaries before the takeover. And frankly, on a good day, we'd get a good hardcore of about 20 people who would chip in, and it was great fun. And if we had a big game at home, it was not uncommon to have no interaction because everyone was actually at the game. Now, with our international fans, that's changed to the extent that when I realised we couldn't keep up with all the interest, I thought I'd start this spin-off podcast, and even this got out of hand, if you will. So many wonderful interactions. So I always apologise. I don't get round to everything, and I know I'll miss lots of brilliant stuff, and I do feel genuinely bad about that. But, you know, if anyone wants to apply to be my PA, great. The rates are awful. Absolutely awful. Anyway, the other wonderful part of AskWxm is that the community that's formed around it is formed of people who have come to the club to a great extent through the TV show Welcome to Wrexham. That's a show about people, not about football, and as a result of that, they bought into the whole community thing that Rob and Ryan bought into, and so many wonderful things have been done in the name of AskWxm. Brilliant charity work, virtual bucket collections. That was one of the first points at which I really realised what people were doing with it. You know, the women's game at the racecourse when we played Commerce Quay Nomads, there was a bucket collection at the game for a worthy cause, which the international fans who couldn't get to decided to match with a virtual bucket collection. You know, that sort of thing has sprung up, and it's a lovely community on both Twitter and Blue Sky. So, you know, if you're like-minded Wrexham fan who likes doing decent things, then it's probably the place for you. Anyway, regardless, this podcast, I am going to answer questions raised by the AskWxm community using that hashtag. And like I said, the first ones are ones from around the start of the season, which I think are still relevant. So I do apologise, but I've sort of held on to them to wait and see what they're like. Right, so first one, Track Act asks, which away day or stadium this season are you most looking forward to? Right, well, we've done it now. Charlton was definitely the one I was looking forward to. I mean, I've been lucky, haven't I? You know, I've been following Wrexham for so long. I've been to an awful lot of grounds. I mean, in Britain, we talk about the 92 club people who've been to every club in the Football League. I am not a member of that, but I've been to a good number of them. I haven't actually counted, but I'd imagine I'd be around 80 odd. Not by consciously looking to do it, but just by following Wrexham around. So there are certain clubs that we rarely or have never played, like Ipswich, West Brom, Leeds. I haven't been to their grounds, but I've sort of accumulated a lot over the last, 45 years. So Charlton was the one I was really looking forward to. Charlton and Bolton. I'd been to Bolton's old ground, which was, how can I put this? Not up to modern scratch. In fact, the current ground, I mean, they've been in it for a good chunk of time. So I was looking forward to Bolton, and I was impressed with Bolton as well, because a lot of the newish grounds that were built, well, the grounds that were built then, in that era, are starting to look a bit tired now. Bolton's isn't. It's impressive. I liked it. But Charlton, I'd never been to Charlton, and it is the old historic Valley ground. Plus, Charlton Athletic have been through a similar journey to us in terms of problems off the pitch, and have had a similar reaction by the fans to save the club. They did an amazing job, and they had to leave the Valley. The Valley was derelict, but they've managed to go back there and restore it. It's a brilliant, happy story of fans in a community pulling together and rescuing their football club. So, yeah, that was a treat, and it didn't let me down. It had a lot of old world charm, and it was also a really, there was an atmosphere of a place for fans, if you will. You know, some murals and different touches that really felt quite sort of homemade, made by fans rather than sort of corporate decisions. I liked them. I liked it a lot there. A little honourable mention, I'd been to Barnsley before, but I'd never been in the stand that the press box is in, which is an old Archibald Leach stand. Archibald Leach, look him up, 1920s architect who specialised in building some really nice football stands. It's a rare case of an Archibald Leach stand which isn't protected by law, apparently because there were doubts as to whether it was a genuine one or not, but there is evidence that's been found now to show that it is. It looks like one, and although it's really antiquated, it was full of character, so I massively enjoyed that as well. Now then, next question. Oops-a-daisy, you see, I haven't done this for a while. I've forgotten how to work the tweets. Evan White asked about our pre-season tour. Do Premier League and MLS teams like Bournemouth, Chelsea and Vancouver, who of course we played against, play a different style of football given their competition level? Does our pre-season form against them bode confidence at League One campaign? There's a lot, I would say, to pick out of that. It's a great question. Different styles, well, I mean, I'm going to say firstly, you can be in the same league and play an extremely different style of football, can't you? You know, whether you're possession based or much more direct, you know, the variation is what makes football so attractive to me, that you can come up against a team one Saturday who play in a very specific way, and then the next Saturday a completely different specific way. So that's a given, I would say. I would, though, say that the higher up the levels you get, the more likely you are to see teams certainly putting a premium on the quality of their passing, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're all playing really short passing Pep Guardiola style football at all. But I do think that, you know, you are paying money for higher quality players. That's why you're a higher quality team, and therefore it would be a bit odd to maybe not take advantage of that. The lower down you go, you're more likely to find teams with more basic players who are more well organised and will hit the ball long. And if it's not accurate, they may hit it into certain areas so that you can put pressure on it. But that's not as common as it used to be. You know, when I was a kid watching football, an awful lot of teams would just go long and then chase it. You know, and that sort of things can be organised. It's a simplistic thing to say. But I remember in the 80s, teams that people call Route 1. Route 1 is a phrase for the long ball game that is always meant to be disparaging. But it was also, I thought, unfairly, because it was always a very organised way of playing football, if not necessarily an attractive one, where you thump it long, you organise, you get players around where that ball's going, or you even thump it long and deliberately put it out of play, because you can then pen the side in for the throw-in. And obviously, you don't need high-quality players necessarily to do that. You need players who can take instructions and be disciplined and organised to do that, don't you? Not to say there weren't good players in those teams, but you could get more bang for your buck, if you will, considering the players that you'd brought in. So, yeah, that used to be more popular. Now, I suppose if you're looking for teams high up who do that, you're looking at the sort of counter-pressing, Gegen-pressing, the Jurgen Klopp approach when he says pressing is the best number 10, pressing is the best way to create, where you're not specifically looking to lose the ball, but if you do, it's all right, because then you have a chance to try and win it back quickly while the other side are transitioning and their players are moving forwards and you catch them out. So massive changes. I can't comment on Vancouver. I can't comment on the MLS. I would have been able to a few years ago because I watched more of it, and I would definitely say that the MLS was more athletic and less technical than the good European leagues, but I think that has changed somewhat. Maybe there's some truth in it still, but the MLS is a much more technical league. I don't know that Europe takes it as seriously as it should, but that's more to do with old world prejudice, I think, than the MLS shortcomings. The MLS clearly has made a lot of progress in recent years. Right, Evan, again, I've gone to the other question. Sorry. Lauren, now, I had to dig deep for this one. Can someone explain to me why we can have 7 players on the bench with Max out injured? So this is when Max Cleworth was out hurt. I thought we needed a club-developed player in a matchday squad to have 7 on the bench. I'm sure I'm missing something here. Right, well, Lauren, you are missing something here, but it's not your fault. In fact, I was determined to make sure this question got in, because I also thought that was the case, and so I had to go to the man who knows everything, Wrexham's club secretary Geraint Parry, who explained it all to me, and I've been itching to use this answer ever since. By the way, if I've got any details of it wrong, I just want to emphasise it's my memory that is wrong. It's definitely not him that is wrong. Okay, that is a guarantee. That guy, he knows his stuff. So let's get on to why, when Max was out injured, you could pick still 7 subs. In fact, to start off with, let's have a look at the definitions, firstly of a homegrown player and then of a club-produced player, and see what it is. Now, homegrown players first, and as it says in this screenshot from the Football League's handbook, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, the EFL handbook is issued every year with all the different regulation changes, and it is quite handy, although it's can be impenetrable sometimes. So here we are. Homegrown players. Each club should be required to nominate a minimum of 7 homegrown players on their team sheet of players for all league matches, including playoff matches. That is your squad list that you submit at the end of the transfer window. Notice it says including playoff matches, but it also says League Cup, EFL Trophy and FA Cup matches are exempt from the homegrown quota. And that's part of that regulation which allows us to play Anthony Ford, or last season Callum McFadden, Bryce Hosanna, players who were not registered for the league games. They could still play in the cup games, and indeed in January Anthony Ford, of course, was named on the bench against Peterborough last week. So that's homegrown players, okay? And we have no problem with that. We've got plenty of homegrown players, although interesting, not as many as you might have thought. And this is me misreading the regulations. At the start of the season, I was trying to work out how many places we got in the squad available, and I quickly gave up on the homegrown player thing because I thought, pretty much everyone is. Well, they're not, actually, because it's specifically England and Wales. Well, fair enough. Which means that players like Tom O'Connor, Stephen Fletcher, James McLean don't count. Owen O'Connell don't count as homegrown because they've not come through English or Welsh clubs. The other one, I believe, is Dan Scarr, who you have to be a Football League club or National League, and he started off when he was young at a lower level than that. Therefore, he doesn't count as homegrown. So that was slightly more complicated than I'd realised, although we're still comfortable. We've got lots of players who do qualify as that. Now then, the next bit, club-developed player. A player who's been registered with the relevant club for a minimum of 12 months prior to the end of his under-19 season. Now, the only one we've got who fits the criteria ex Max Cleworth. The other youth players are too young. You don't need to register them anyway. So it doesn't matter. But he's the only club-produced player that we have. And the regulations, and this is where we've been misreading. It says that once you put your list in, after the closure of the summer transfer window, each club shall be required to nominate at least one club-developed player on either the squad list or on the team sheet for all league matches. So the key part there is squad list. We nominated Max on the squad list. We registered him. Therefore, we've fulfilled this criteria. We've ticked the club developed players box. So whether he's in our squad or not is irrelevant. It says the next sentence, where a club does not name a club developed player on either its squad list or team sheet, the club will only be permitted to name up to 8 in the Championship or 6 League 1 and League 2 substitutes on the team sheet. So that's where the confusion lies. We didn't have to name him on the team sheet. We only had to name him on the squad list. It's homegrown players where if you haven't got enough of those, you have to leave someone off the bench. So I hope that clears her up. I certainly needed it clearing up for me. So there we are. It's not as complicated as it might have at first appeared. Okay, next from High Desert Dragon. Hi Desert Dragon. How long do you think it'll be until Welsh women's football becomes fully professional? Okay, a very, very long time, if ever. Sadly, I'm not going to say never because, life changes, things change. But at the moment, I don't consider that to be foreseeable or even a possible target, if I'm honest. I mean, if you look, we've only got 8 teams in our top division. Half of those are semi-pro, and the other half, you can't see them even, certainly not going professional anytime soon. It's difficult to imagine. I mean, we get fabulous crowds for the level of competition that it is, but our home crowd still, 600 odds. You're only going to be able to sustain it if you take money from other sources like the men's team, and I'm not quite sure how that would work in terms of financial fair play. I mean, for the impacting the men's team, are you reducing the scope to pay wages for the men's team as a result of that? And if you aren't affiliated to a men's team, what then? So no, I think in Wales, like I said, the crowds aren't great. I don't think there's any realistic hope for that in our lifetimes. Having said that, I do, and I've said this before, and I apologise for being repetitive, I do think that we are in an exciting time here where we could actually push on and take women's football in Wales to places we didn't expect because of Rob and Ryan. Having big owners, people, high profile owners like them matter. And as a result, I feel that the Welsh FA need to grab hold of this chance to get all this publicity and give us something to build from. And then who knows how ambitious we could be. But most certainly, as things stand, sadly, I don't see that happening, if I'm honest. Right then, Jamie Troll. Love the new floodlights. What are the characteristics, beg your pardon, of each of the stands? Is one favoured by families, another by the Red Army, etc., or is it all a total mix? It's a great question, that. I think, to be fair, a lot of it just conforms with the conformity of British football. You're going to have a rowdy, loud home end, which at the moment, of course, is the Stoke Cold Brew Coffee end. Traditionally, it was the Cop, and that would be where you would go. You stand up, which again is always synonymous with making more noise, partly because you can go and make sure you're in the gang you want to be in, and also maybe with the other noisy guys. The centre of the back of a home end is always traditionally where the most noise comes from. So that used to be the Cop. Now it's the Stoke Cold Brew Coffee stand. I assume very strongly that when we build the Kop, it'll revert back and the home fans will be housed there. Now then, you've got to have an away end as well, obviously. As for other areas, that's quite interesting. You see, if you go in the ends where it's noisy, the tradition in Britain is you consider the side stands to be where older and more boring people go. It's certainly where you find me since I was a teenager. So that's proven it correct, isn't it? Within that, often clubs will have family stands. Isn't that the Wrexham Lager stand a bit nearest the Kop at the moment? Or am I dreaming? I might be dreaming that. We also obviously have the quiet zone on the Mold Road stands, the Macron stand nearest the Kop. But, yeah, the Mold Road stands used to have a bit of a reputation for people complaining. But I seem to recall Wrexham Lager stand had that beforehand. Beyond that, I don't know, would we really... I don't know if I'd particularly... anything else. I'd be fascinated to hear any clarification on that from those of you who are in those stands and exactly how you see it. That wasn't the full answer. Sorry. I did my best, honest. Now, Vic Schultz. Oh, now, this comes from the Peterborough match because I had a bit of a rant at half-time. This is one of my bugbears. This is the one which Vic rightly pointed out drove me to saying it pushes my buttons to the extent that I'm more button than man. How is extra time calculated? Added time, that is. I genuinely want to understand. The amount of injury time for this half seems ridiculously low. Right, okay. Bit of context. Peterborough game. There were quite a lot of stoppages. 1 minute added on. Now then, how is it determined? The referee is the sole arbiter of how much time is added on. And whenever they say time is up, that's that. Time is up. They transfer that information to the fourth official, who holds up the board, which means that for some bizarre reason everyone thinks the fourth official's deciding when they absolutely are not. You watch about a minute before half time, you'll see referees often making little signals. The classic one, like flapping one arm like a penguin, the number of times they want minutes to be added. So 3 flaps for 3 minutes. Now then, within that they are supposed to take into account any stoppages, so goal celebrations, substitutions, injuries, anything that they consider to be relevant. Not necessarily throw-ins unless people are taking time, because obviously referees, if they feel it seems time wasting, will add that on as a punishment at the end. But it's an arbitrary, personal, subjective judgment by that official to decide how much exactly to add on, which is what of course leads to controversy. If you run a stopwatch on a football match, you'll probably get about 32 minutes of action, half an hour or so in each half, which leads some people to say we should run a stopwatch on it and make it like ice hockey and sports like that, where the clock stopped all the time. The trouble is that would make football last a lot longer. It would be physically taxing on the players, and let's be frank here, it wouldn't be as much fun. They tried to do this in the Qatar World Cup when they said that referees really should be although they're allowed to work out the added time, they should be taking all stoppages into account. And so you ended up getting 10, 11, 15 minutes of added time onto halves. I mean, the TV channels didn't like it because there's a danger of games overrunning. Well, there's an almost certainty of games overrunning. And I've got to be honest, fans, I include myself in this, didn't like it for the simple reason that, suddenly games dragged on horribly. So, yeah, I don't think that works practically. The issue, though, for me with referees is, there's a convention. Now, I've said this before, I love watching Spanish football. It seems to be really sort of ingrained there, but it's definitely true here as well. 1 minute in the first half, 3 in the second. Why you would have more time added in the second than the first, I don't know. I guess maybe it's some sort of psychological thing of let's give a team a chance to change the result at the end. I don't know, but there's nothing in the rules that say that at all. And I just thought it felt like an application of that when the referee against Peterborough added 1 minute on, when clearly to me there should have been more time added. I thought his 5 minutes in the second half was a bit of an overestimate. I didn't think the second half had stopped that much. Of course, my judgment could be affected by the fact that we were winning by then. I don't know. It is subjective, and it does mean that people maybe will complain like I am, and I haven't necessarily got the grounds to. But I don't know. There's sort of guidance, and I've got to say it's guidance, it's not a rule, that, you should have 30 seconds for substitutions, things like that, a minute for a goal, as a rough guide. And people often make reference to that, which I think is fair enough, but it's not a rule. But yeah, ultimately, the ref decides, the ref is the sole arbiter, and that's that. Another from Vic. I'm still pretty new to all this and learning. Well, Vic, can I just say, the questions from people who feel that way are often the very best ones. But it feels like O'Connell and James being so solid as game managers helps us so much. I 100% agree with that, and I can't emphasise enough the importance of that. It's one of those intangibles that you can't measure necessarily. But having good, strong, experienced leaders is very important for a football team. Matty James has played at a very high level. He is smart. He has played a lot of championship games where he has regulated play, controlled the tempo of games. That's his role as well, as a slightly deeper midfielder, as a player who's very safe in possession. But yes, absolutely so. It's great to have those experienced players. I mean, if we look at Peterborough, I mean, their squad's quite remarkable. They had terrific success last year with a very young squad and trying to do the same this year, although they lost a couple of good players. Their only player over 26 in their entire squad is the goalkeeper, who at the moment is out of favour. And is that partly responsible for their really poor recent record, especially away from home? Do they need a couple of calming people in there just to take control, to regulate matters, to give a bit of advice, to be shouting when that firebrand winger is breaking away in the 7th minute of added time? Take it to the corner flag, don't try and cross it in, and then if their keeper catches it, they'll knock it straight back up here and they'll have a chance to equalise. That sort of person. I mean, I'm thinking back to Dean Keats here, the manager before Phil Parkinson, who I got a lot of time for, really good professional as a player and as a manager, and he was very good at recruiting strong personalities, strong characters. He brought in Sean Pearson as his captain. Pearson was a proper leader. Pearson would be loud and demanding on the pitch, which was great, because basically he would be expecting people to live up to his standards, and that led to, I think, a raising of standards around him. I mean, Keats's best team had a superb back four of him and Manny Smith, two excellent centre-backs, and then Kevin Roberts on the right, who was a very rugged right-sided full-back, and on the left, James Jennings, who was good at going forwards but was strong and aggressive in the tackle. And that unit was excellent, and Pearson at the heart of it. They were all like-minded, they were all like that, and he didn't let goals in. So yeah, those sort of personalities are extremely, extremely important. And Wrexham have got those personalities. I mean, I would certainly say Matty James is a very obvious example of that. McLean as well. In terms of standards, I think you could definitely put him in that category. Fletcher's been around the block many, many times. There'll be other leaders on the pitch that you would look at and say, yeah, these guys are grabbing this and taking the team forwards and setting an example. You're quite right. Hard to measure, but incredibly important. Jeff Lowe, it's a beauty this. If the keeper is treated for an injury, why don't they have to stay off for a bit? Well, indeed. I mean, there's an obvious answer here, which is you really skew the game, bizarrely, if one side is down to 10 players and has no keeper. I mean, I guess if that did happen, you'd put an outfield player in goal temporarily. But yeah, the 30-second rule for leaving the pitch when you've received treatment doesn't apply to goalkeepers for that reason. It would suddenly create a mad 30-second lottery. It would also, of course, cause stoppages while players change equipment. Player puts a keeper's shirt on, puts the gloves on, and 30 seconds later the keeper's coming back on, so they're going to have to do that again. So there's lots of practical reasons for it, and I would say, although this does happen, it doesn't happen as much in Britain as in some other countries. And the classic one, and I'm taking Tim Vickery of the BBC's lead, outstanding journalist on South American football. He feels it happens a lot in South American football. Goalkeeper goes down, the ref's got to stop the game, haven't they? A player goes down, an outfield player. Okay, there's going to be pressure on the ref to stop the game, but he can ignore that. The opposition can ignore that. And I would argue, unless it's a serious injury or a head injury, which could be serious, you should ignore it. But having said that, goalkeeper goes down, you've got to stop the game, really, because otherwise you're making a bit of a freak show out of it all. But that does open up the possibility of a cynical goalkeeper going down to stop play, because there's lots of pressure on their team, for example, and they want to just have a break so the team can regroup. And then as well, they need to be kept on the pitch as well, so afterwards there'll be no penalty. There won't be off the 30 seconds. So yeah, you're quite right, it's inconsistent. I mean, I've got to say, I think this 30-second rule is ludicrous personally. I'm not arguing against players being punished if a referee feels they're play acting and told you can't come on straight away, although I accept it's asking a lot of a referee to get that right, and they're going to get a lot of grief, no matter what, even if they are right. Having said that, this is treating everyone like they're cheating by punishing them. I don't see the point of that. And we've seen a couple of cases lately, not least Paul Mullin at Barnsley, where because they're sort of sticking to 30 seconds, players are now coming on in more advantageous positions than they used to be allowed to, and the referee would have to judge, right, they're far away from the ball, they can come on without interfering when they come on the pitch. So I find it an odd one. I don't like players, someone gets clattered and then they have to stay off for 30 seconds. Well, why are they getting punished? It's a stupid rule, to be honest. I'm turning more button than man again. I need to move on. Vic Schultz again. I love it, but can someone explain the thinking behind Lee as a forward? Well, different shapes, different formations, different concepts. I guess the Peterborough game might be a nice... I keep banging on about this game. It was our least creative performance of the season. Having Lee might have helped a little bit. You drop a player off and put them into midfield, and if it's a player like Lee with creativity, then hopefully you'll be making more chances, and having that extra player in midfield maybe will help you to have control of the game more. You can outnumber the opposition in the middle of the pitch. It also hopefully gives permission for players to play a bit higher up. We've got the extra midfielder, so Lee or somebody else can get forwards. That's the key as to whether it works, I think, to a great extent. A lot of people look at football very simplistically. Oh, they're playing five at the back, they must be defensive. Well, not necessarily. Look at Wrexham. You could call Wrexham five at the back, but our wing-backs are like wingers. Oh, they only got one up front. Oh, they're not very attacking. A number of times you hear pundits on TV going on and on about they need a second striker up there, because that's how people played in their day in the 80s. The key thing is, like I said, to make it work, you've got to get players up and supporting those strikers, and often players running from deep, coming from unexpected places, midfielders coming up who haven't been tracked by their midfield marker because they didn't expect her, can be much more effective than having two players up front waiting for the ball to arrive to them. How many times have we watched a game and thought, oh, Mullin and Palmer, they look sharp, but they need better service. Well, you could argue Lee in for one of them is to try and improve the level of service, to try and maybe get the ball on the floor and take the ball higher up the pitch, so you're closer to Palmer and Mullin, so you're not hitting them from a distance and hoping they can tame the ball or flick it on and then do something between the two of them. It's about bringing the whole game closer to them, if you will. So I hope that there's lots more I could say about that. And Lee's sort of, when we use him that way, is a bit half and half, isn't he? Lee can finish. Lee scores goals. So the hope is that he'll get into those areas and he can take his chances as well. I think the bottom line is we wouldn't really be looking to do this if Mullin was firing on all cylinders, and when he is, maybe we'll look at that a little bit less. But in the meantime, it's an interesting option, isn't it? I think so. I hope I've given some of that answer. I don't think it's possible to give all unless I devote the whole podcast to that. I would if you wanted me to, Now, Dave, also similar point. I've been waiting for Mullin and Marriott to be on the pitch together. Let's see if my dream is as good in real life. I kind of feel, having watched Parkinson for 3.5 years, he might be a little reluctant to do that. Simply because, and he explains this in the first series of Welcome to Wrexham when Ollie Palmer's coming in. He explains it as well in genuine sort of layman's terms rather than making it complicated, but he says it's just good having a big and a little bloke next to each other. And that is a traditional combination in football that can really work, and certainly has done for Parkinson. The big guy is strong, holds the ball up, flicks the ball on with his head. The little quick guy latches onto it, feeds off him, and scores lots of goals. And that's clearly something Parkinson likes. There's no reason why you can't play two smaller players like Mullin and Marriott together, but you have to understand if you choose to do that, there are certain approaches you can't adopt. You can't just keep knocking the ball long for them. You've got, as I said in the answer to the last question, to get your midfield a lot higher up the pitch and work combinations and try and create space that way. Okay, you can try and knock the ball in behind the defence, so that's a sort of traditional thing teams sometimes do. Turn the other side's defence, you would say. Knock it in behind them, so that even if they get there first, they're hassled by Marriott and Mullin, they have to knock it clear. You win it back again higher up the pitch because you intercept that poor clearance, and then you've got them under pressure. So that is a good way to put teams under pressure, but the quality of players we've got, I'm not convinced we'd actually really look to do that all that much. We'd look to use Marriott and Mullin's pace. I mean, we've seen us do that with both of them. But I don't think that it's Parkinson's first go-to idea. So we could see them play together, absolutely. It's perfectly legitimate that we may try to do that. However, I think he likes having a big man who can hold that ball up. Mullin is a great player, and he has some of those characteristics. You can hit him long because he likes physical engagement with the centre-backs. He can back in and pin them a bit, but he hasn't got that size of Palmer, Fletcher, Farl. So it's about him being strong and rolling them rather than sort of pinning them. And he can give real problems. Have a look back at that promotion game against Boreham Wood, a final home game in the National League, and you'll see him do that to Chris Bush, a very experienced non-league centre-back who has played so many hundreds of games and physically dominated against big guys like Palmer, and then Mullin just keeps backing into him, bouncing off him, rolling him, and just gives him the worst nightmare of all time. The first goal comes directly from that. The second goal comes with Mullin having worn down Bush psychologically and physically to the point where Mullin's running directly at him. Bush having taken up a much deeper position than he should have done because he fears Mullin. And is backing off in an attempt to sort of give him and his defensive unit a bit more space and time to deal with him. But the opposite happens. Mullin exposes him and runs at him, and you can just see Bush, he doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know what's going to happen. And Mullin fakes to hit it with one foot and then hits it with the other. And poor Bush has turned himself inside out by this point. Not literally, figuratively. It was not an X-rated match, but you know what I mean. So, there's all sorts of ways you can play, and Mullin has certain elements of that, but launching long stuff at Mullin as if he's a target man, A, would not bring you consistently the results you want, and B, would be a terrible waste of a magnificent talent. Okie dokie, let's see what's next. Well, let's add a few interesting points here about that Peterborough game as well. Palmer grinding down the defence and Fletcher exploiting their tiredness is a good combo, but we really need Marriott back. Completely agree with that. I would also say, like I say, Mullin, it's been difficult for him coming back from that injury. Him on firing on all cylinders would also be great. Said as well, a couple of scary bits when our backline didn't let Okonkwo get the ball. Trust Arthur to clear it, don't get in his way. Again, fair enough. It's a slightly complex one. I'm speaking here as I'm a failed goalkeeper, but I like to try and look at things from a goalkeeper's point of view because I'm awkward. And I would say, I don't like to say this because of what I just told you, but if in doubt, I think a defender's got to play the ball. In the penalty area, if you feel it's going to be okay to leave it, but you're not 100%, get rid of it and have an argument afterwards. And although I was, as a goalkeeper, maybe have that argument and say, why the hell didn't you leave it? I called for it. But deep down, I understand that it's probably the right thing to do. Also, post-match thoughts. I don't agree with this one. It's just warning you beforehand. Recanting my support of Mullin as skipper, it's distracting for him. He needs to focus up front. I think it's the operation and just having to come back into to recover again, which has held him back a bit. Plus the fact that he's missed a couple of chances, which I'm sure he's aware of, isn't he? Obviously, and he just needs to get through that by banging a couple of goals in, and you'll forget all about that. Then I don't think personally it's about being captain. I think it's more just about. He hasn't quite got there yet after the operation. And then I 100% agree with this. Revan and Mendy have so much potential but need regular playing time to get their confidence back, especially should Revan near the end. Yeah, I'd maybe substitute rhythm for confidence in some ways as well. But you're right, it could well be that too. But they haven't really played many games. They've really... Revan played a league game, did in Burton. But apart from that, the two of them really, the last couple of months have really been playing the AFL trophy games, and they're spaced out, aren't they? So yes, I totally agree. The thing is, would you drop Ryan Barnett? Would you drop James McLean? That's the issue. It's a nice issue to have, isn't it? We've got terrific quality and depth like that. But that's the problem Revan and Mendy have got, isn't it? While Barnett and McLean are in form and fit, they're going to struggle to get into the team, in all honesty. And that is not a comment on them. It's a comment on the quality of the players ahead of them, and a comment on the quality of the squad which Phil Parkinson has accumulated. All right, and last one now. I just wanted to mention this quickly. Gareth, the Brit in Vegas, was talking about Fletcher's booking. If you take your shirt off, it's called excessive celebration, and it's a yellow. Yeah, and I just wanted to make a little comment on that. Yes, you're absolutely right, of course, Gareth. He was clarifying that for people who weren't aware of it. It's a funny little rule, isn't it? And one of the refs actually seem to apply 100% of the time. Other ones, like the kicking the ball away one, tend to be more a matter for their judgment, which irks fans, of course, and sometimes players. I've got to say, I think it's another case of we all do it like this, so we don't stop and think about it. It was brought in, as I recall, like late 80s, early 90s, because players were taking their shirts off to celebrate. I think it was felt that it was time wasting. I have a less harsh view on it, in the sense that, for me, this comes back to what I say about referees. I feel like a referee should be looking at a celebration and genuinely looking at their watch and seeing how long it's taking. And if they took 2 minutes to celebrate, don't get me wrong, he should be, come on, let's get back onto it. We're here to entertain. Let's get the show back on the road. But just make sure that wherever you're planning to add on, you add that time on. I don't think necessarily that it's an issue that you time waste from the celebration. Celebrations are nice, aren't they? Likewise, players get booked fairly regularly, and this would come under that. The phrase they use is over-celebrating. I remember seeing a player, I don't think who it was, getting booked. A fan had like a sort of trumpet style thing, real trumpet obviously, and a player grabbed it and blew into it like trying to pretend to play a fanfare after scoring, and got booked for over celebrating. I think that's funny. I think that's a bit of character. Personally, I got no problem with it. How much time did that really add on? Neil Ashton, Wrexham left back, got sent off at Stockport. Here's a weird circumstance. We win 3-2 at Stockport. He scores 2 penalties. When he scores the first one, he runs to the Wrexham fans, and I'm not saying he was reluctant, but the Wrexham fans grabbed him. Sort of holding on to him up against advertising hoardings. The referee books him for over-celebrating, which the ref has got the right to do. So if you go in the crowd, you're supposed to get a yellow, so okay, fair enough. We then get another penalty. Ashton scores that. Exactly the same things happened. And he's got the most bizarre sending off, 2 yellow cards for over-celebrating, because again, the fans have pulled him in. Now, you can argue, of course, Ashton, especially after the first yellow, should have been a bit smarter, but nonetheless, there's a bit of me thinks, why is it that players get booked for celebrating with their own fans, and then when you see players gesturing at the opposing fans after scoring a goal, fingers to the lips, hands behind the ears, or worse, they don't get booked. Also, here's something I don't see. Buttons being pressed. Here's something else I don't see happening, and I don't get it. The odd players who celebrate goals by things like pretending to fire an arrow into the crowd, or even, and you're not going to have to look hard to find these players who pretend to fire machine guns into the crowd in celebration after their goal. I don't think that's in terribly good taste, and I'm not sure I care if a player takes their shirt off or not to celebrate. I don't like seeing players pretending to machine gun people after a goal. I mean, when was that acceptable? That's not right. So, I don't know, it's all very inconsistent. I remember at the time that the part of the rationale for booking players when they took shirts off was players could have political slogans underneath their shirts, and, football authorities don't like that sort of thing. They like to present this idea of sport and politics shouldn't mix, while each administrator in sport is up to their elbows in politics and doing all sorts, whether it's dicey or not. I mean, it's politics. Politics is life. Come on. Anyway, another rant out of the way. Robbie Fowler, legendary Liverpool striker, for example, was fined because he celebrated a goal by lifting his shirt, and underneath he had a vest on in which he'd written a message of support for the dockers in Liverpool who were on strike. Now, for me, that doesn't offend me. Working class Liverpool player showing his support for the working class in Liverpool. That's a club which prides itself, despite the fact that obviously it's changed in modern times, on having that working class identity. That doesn't trouble me in the slightest. And it doesn't trouble me that, captains of industry are upset. But I can understand, I guess, should people be picking sides or not. But if you're not doing that, I don't know. There is a bit of me as well says, why do you take your shirt off? If you do something good in life, do you automatically feel an uncontrollable urge to take your shirt off? Maybe so, now I think about it. Maybe so. If I say a good line in commentary, straight off with the kit, I tell you. If you have Ronaldo's physique, I get that. But, I don't know. It feels a bit artificial. If you score a goal, you're excited, you rip your shirt off. I don't know. You haven't got very good impulse control. Surely it goes through your mind, okay, I can take a yellow for this. I think it's a very cheap yellow, and if I was a manager, I'd go nuts at a player who did that. Unless he was Stephen Fletcher. A, he's about a foot taller than me, so I wouldn't go nuts at Stephen Fletcher. But B, Fletcher plays a sort of bit part role, doesn't he? Cameos off the bench. He's not getting booked on a regular basis. The danger of him getting suspended, which is my issue for yellow cards, is slim to zero. So I quite enjoyed him taking the shirt off and throwing it up in the air. Because see how high he got it. How do you throw something which isn't solid so high? It was impressive. One final thing I want to say about shirts is that legendary early 90s striker Gary Bennett used to do this for Wrexham. And he was one of the early adopters of taking shirts off. And there are some who might argue he was one of the players who sort of provoked the ban. Bennett's response to this, and I think you can see this, if I remember correctly, when we knocked Ipswich out of the cup, one of our famous cup upsets in the mid-90s. His response was he looked like he's taking his shirt off to wind the ref off, but what he'd actually do is slip his sleeves out and then just turn his shirt around. Ho ho ho! I didn't. You can't bug me. Good times. Happy days. So yeah, on that happy memory, let's draw a finish to this return of the AskWxm podcast. I need to make sure that I don't do the next one in 18 months. Let's make the gap a little bit shorter, shall we? It's been a pleasure chatting to you all again. Ta-ta, chaps. I am Mark Griffiths from Wrexham AFC. And I love my life!